And we welcome you to Season 1, Episode 2 of Wilk and Wiss. We previewed the AFC last week. Now we're previewing the NFC. As it's game week, Cole, there will be a game played on Thursday in the National Football League.
Doesn't get better than this. And we talk about doing this week and last week. If you want to go back and check our AFC predictions, you can go look at that on the feed. And then, if you want to just keep listening to every episode from last year, go and do that too. We love the listens. Now that we are available on video on YouTube, you can also see that we're wearing the same hats and shirts. We're actually recording these episodes back to back. And so if any other crazy roster stuff happens over the weekend, we don't know about it yet. But as of a day after those 53-man rosters being released, we are looking down at every roster in the NFL and where their Utah connections are at.
Yeah. Happy anniversary to the missus on this Monday. Monday. That's why we're doing
we're not recording on Monday, because Tanner's off enjoying his anniversary.
There's no games
before football.
Yeah, there's no. I got married the day before the college season really got underway. Some people choose not to do that, and
we don't talk to them.
We don't go to their weddings. We don't participate in those kinds of things. Ironically, one of our guests from last year, Cole, is getting married November 9th, the day of BYU Utah, in Utah.
What?
They are neither a BYU or a Utah fan because they didn't grow up here, so they don't have any ties that way. But I thought it was an interesting choice, so I'll leave it at that. Well, let's jump into the NFC. We did AFC, now NFC East is where we're starting. The division that does not get back-to-back teams winning the division.
You tried last year. You picked it.
I do it every year.
Are you though this year?
I don't know. You'll find out here shortly. Let's start with Philly though. The Eagles kind of making some big changes, coordinating changes again for them after the collapse they had last year. Britton Covey making the initial 53-man roster. Did play a little receiver for them at the end of last year, but is, of course, a dynamite return specialist. Played at the University of Utah, and then, of course, was a Timpview Thunderbird as well. Are they the Thunderbirds? You're a guy who does Utah County. Okay. As someone who focuses on 3A and below, I know Orem Tigers because that's where my parents went anyway. But Britton Covey, back for another year. They like him there in Philadelphia. I saw Britton Covey in a restaurant this offseason in Provo. It was my wife's birthday. He is a small dude. Like Britton Covey, like we're small dudes. You and I were short dudes. Britton Covey is a short, small dude. The only reason I would have recognized his face, he was sitting behind me. All of a sudden, his wife starts talking about OTAs. And I'm like, that is a very specific NFL term.
Mm-hmm.
College doesn't use that. Nobody uses that, but the National Football League. So I text my wife as she's sitting across from me. I'm like, I need you to take a picture of whoever this is behind me. Sure enough, it's Britton Covey. She snuck a picture. Because, he's tiny, but he's dang good at what he does as a return specialist.
And, so let's talk about the return specialist, because especially this year, in the year of our Lord 2024, the NFL has changed their return rules and the way that we're doing it. And so just having a return specialist, for the since Devin, in a post-Devin Hester, but pre-this year world, anyone can really be the return specialist. You don't, guarantee a spot on the 53 being a return specialist. This year, that could change.
Yeah.
You have the Rams saying that Kyron Williams, their number one back, is going to be returning punts. The NFL wants to be able to take advantage of these new rules. And so we're going to see. Hopefully we'll mention Britton Covey's name.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Interesting season for Philly.
Dallas Cowboys are next on our list, and they do not have any initial Utah connections that we see.
Yeah. Oh, gave CD Lamb a lot of money, which they needed to do. A lot of questions still surrounding Dak Prescott's future.
And Mike Parsons, for that matter. Those are the next two guys to get paid.
Yep. Going to be interesting. The Commanders in Washington, they added 2 new guys this offseason with Utah connections. Corner Michael Davis comes over from the Chargers. He played at BYU. And then Bobby Wagner, after going to the Rams and then going back to the Seahawks, now finds himself a Commander. They're kind of trying to bring some good veterans in where this is going to be a younger team, new coaching staff. Dan Quinn obviously is a big Bobby Wagner guy, big part of his development in Seattle. Now the head coach of the Commanders in their kind of new era with new ownership and a new quarterback for the umpteenth time in my lifetime. But we'll see. We'll see what goes down in Washington long term.
Yeah, the idea of bringing in a bunch of veteran defensive players means you hopefully set your floor high-ish, right? You're making sure that things don't go disastrously for your very high variance number one first round pick, which is what Jaden Daniels kind of is seen like. Like if anyone's gonna bust out of those top three guys, probably like Daniels has the biggest possibility of it, but also he could be the next Mike Vick or beyond. And so like that pendulum swings. And so as long as you can set kind of like a baseline of decency around him, hopefully the whole floor won't fall out. And yet some of these veterans that they brought in are so old that if every single one of them is injured by week 6, then all of a sudden Washington has no defense to rely on. And the offense is still kind of that offense that allowed Sam Howell to get sacked 4,000 times last year. And what are we really doing with the Commanders? We mentioned a couple teams that have a shot at the number 1 pick in the draft in the last episode, and the Commanders, who have their quarterback, and so they're not trying to tank, they don't want to be up there, could find themselves there.
Easily, yeah. Yeah. But there's hope in Washington for the first time in a long time, like actual real hope. So
comes with a new owner and a new GM too, beyond like the normal stuff that we talk about, the trickle down, the coaches and the players specifically.
Yeah.
And then the Giants, the other team in this division that actually just don't have any Utah connections, but Brian Daboll as a coach, I think sets a higher floor for you than that Dan Quinn hire does over in Washington. And so even if it's still Daniel Jones, and even if you can ask questions about their drafting of skill positions in the past, like Malik Neighbors hopefully should be better than all those other guys, even though he's still just like a skinny slot looking guy like every other receiver they've drafted. Neighbors, he does feel a little bit different, and Daniel Jones has been to the playoffs, even if he's probably not going to do that again. You know, the Giants, I feel more comfortable about them being 6-11 than I do like the Commanders maybe getting to that point.
Yeah, they're not going to be good. Vibes there are still not good after all the hard knock stuff, the way they handled the Saquon situation, the way they kind of you see the
how they in division.
Yeah, I mean, just there's going to be some firings in New York this offseason one way or another with the Giants. If Daboll goes,
this is not the show where we predict who's going to get the first overall pick. This is the show where we predict the division winners.
No.
So ignoring those bottom 2 teams, are you picking a back-to-back winner or aren't you, Tanner? The people got to know.
I'm going to. I think the Cowboys win it again. Because there's just still a lot of questions for me with Philly, specifically the Jason Kelce retirement, both from a leadership. I don't think we realize how important those leadership and locker room guys are until they're gone. So that's something I'm keeping an eye on in Philly. Do they have enough still there? The Lane Johnsons, the Fletcher Cox guys that have still been a part of this core for Philadelphia for so long? Or is Jason Kelce really that guy that made the wheels go? And how does the tush push work without Jason Kelce? Didn't look good in the preseason. So I think there's enough questions in Philadelphia that I'm going to take Dallas to win the division.
And then with a new offensive coordinator coming in that wants to run a wildly different offense, hopefully could be good, right? Kellen Moore's got that Mountain West connection that we want to highlight here. But Jalen Hurts, Kelce was a guy that called out all the protections when they got up to the line. He was, more than just that strong locker room presence on the field. He was doing very specific things. And even at the late 30s of his career, was still playing at a Pro Bowl level, just on the field doing his normal job in addition to all the extra cerebral things that he would do. Jalen Hurts now has to take over that. Can he adapt to this totally new offense? Is Saquon going to seamlessly be able to roll in here? Yeah, I think maybe. And I'm going to pick the Eagles just because the Cowboys aren't going to repeat. And I think the Cowboys are going downhill harder than anything the Eagles will. Although, we'll talk about our wild card predictions at the end of the show. And I mean, the Cowboys are going to make it for me.
Let's head north. This is the most fascinating division in football this year.
Yes,
without question.
I'm glad you agree.
I was it you in one of our group texts that said this will be the most fascinating division simply because all the kickers suck in this division?
That's also it's got so much potential because every single team has very exciting things that could happen. The coordinators, the defenses, and then all the kickers suck, and so every game could be decided by a last-second miss.
Let's start in Detroit. Sione Vaki drafted. He's a multi-positional guy. Played running back and safety for the University of Utah. They're going to use him as a running back for now. For now, he could make that switch back to safety for Detroit. But Penei Sewell, all-pro offensive tackle, phenomenal. Got paid as well this summer, deservedly so, out of Desert Hills High School down there in St. George. So, year 4 of Dan Campbell. Is this year 4 of Dan Campbell?
Would have been 2021, 2, 3, 4. Yeah.
Yeah, this is year 4. Should have been in the Super Bowl. Don't want to talk about it. Love me some Detroit Lions football. Excited to see what they continue to build off of going forward.
And then if you want to talk about this particular show, talking about things in this division, Jordan Love is the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers out of Utah State, former first-round pick in 2020. Talking about guys that got paid. Say hello to the richest man in football, Jordan Love. And then also safety out of BYU and Stansbury High, Zane Anderson is on the Green Bay Packers 53.
Kind of a similar Miles Killebrew type role when we talked about that last episode with Pittsburgh. That's kind of Zane's role there. And from what I've heard, a great locker room guy. Zane's cousin lives here in Manti. And ironically, is a diehard Bears fan. Went last year when they played in Lambeau, and he wore a Zane Anderson Packers jersey, which is kind of cool. Familial ties will cut all that. But just saying, yeah, they love him in the locker room, which is cool for a special teams guy to have that big of an impact on your locker room. Kind of an interesting insight there.
Before we get off the Green Bay Packers, Tanner, I mean, Jordan Love will probably drive a lot of our conversation through the year. And so before we even put a title on who we think is going to win the division as a team, what are your Jordan Love 2024 thoughts? He got paid. They seem to think that he's the franchise guy, but and we hyped him a lot during, even in the early season when things started to turn around. We were like, oh, there's like hope that we're seeing here.
Yeah.
But that like preliminary hope turned into full-throated, just like Jordan Love's the guy over the course of a 6-game stretch. And normally you get 4 years, like 5 with a 5th-year option to decide if your quarterback's the guy. This was decided over the course of 8 decent games. Are you all the way there with Jordan Love?
Without question.
Okay.
Without question. And here's why. Because you developed him. You let him sit behind Aaron Rodgers, and learn. And now Matt LaFleur gets to run his stuff. And it took a minute for that to click. And then once it did, again, and they also blew a lead to the Niners. They had a lead in San Francisco. So the NFC North let me down one team at a time last year in the playoffs. But no, Jordan Love's the guy. I don't think there's any question there. He's in-house. They let him develop the way I think you should let certain quarterbacks develop. If they're not ready right away, nothing. And they knew Jordan Love wasn't going to be. And what they did was fantastic. And it's an unseen thing in the NFL, in today's NFL.
I mean, I think I am there too, because again, we've paid special attention to Jordan Love. I mean, this last year was the first year we did a podcast, and he became the darling of this podcast as he started to emerge. So, I mean, I've paid more attention to Jordan Love than your average fan, and I did see the right stuff there. I still want to entertain the possibility that 8 games does not a whole career make.
Sure.
But you said it, Matt LaFleur being able to run his stuff. When LaFleur first got here to work with Aaron Rodgers fought back on him. Love is a humble guy. He was able to run the LaFleur stuff, and I think LaFleur established himself as like a top 5 just play caller, button pusher from the offensive perspective. And so even if Love takes a little bit of a step down, the production might not, and the team might not, and assuming all the other young guys continue to a little bit upward trajectory along with Jordan Love, Packers should find themselves in the playoffs again easily.
I think that's one of the most exciting things is the youth of this team, that they got to the playoffs despite that, all that. They got better each and every week. Still lost some games at the end of the, but at the end of the day, what Jordan and what he did to Dallas is what really, and sure, it's Dallas, it's the playoffs. We can make that joke over and over again. That was when I was like, no, he's here. He's definitely here. And then he got the real challenge with San Francisco, right? And he did it for 2 quarters and then couldn't sustain it, learn from it, get better. So
This is the NFC half of our preview pod, and so Tanner's going to take as many shots at the 49ers as he possibly can.
Sure. All is not well there, I hope. Vikings.
Vikings are next, and all seems to be in chaos for the Minnesota Vikings so far. They do have one Utah connection. Tanner, would you like to pronounce this name for us?
So this kid's literally a kid, undrafted free agent that made the team this year. So he's a rookie. Defensive tackle, played at East High. Takai Taimani, getting there in Minnesota. So Jaron Hall was cut on Thursday morning after making the initial, and they replaced him with Brett Rippon. You've already got Sam Darnold, and you've got Nick Mullins, who we know who they are. We know who Brett Rippon is. Why not keep the guy that's maybe got a slightly higher ceiling? I get Jaron looked awful when he played in actual NFL footage, actual NFL meaningful snaps last year. He looked pretty good in preseason, though. I don't understand why bringing in a third, like, Sam Darnold is the Michael Jordan of Nick Mullins, and Brett Rippon is the Tobias Harris of Nick Mullins.
And then Mullins is Nick Mullins, right?
Yes.
They just took different iterations of the same guy.
Yeah, which if you're trying to run,
Hall could give you something.
That's the only problem I have with it. There's been some debate about this. There's where I have the problem with it. But at the end of the day, J.J. McCarthy is who they are invested in, even though he's out for the whole year. It's not the worst thing, though, to happen to the Vikings. Be bad, get another good draft pick this year. Try to keep Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison happy. They're not going to be a playoff team by any means. They'll probably be the worst team in this division simply because they don't have a good quarterback. But I think letting McCarthy sit and analyze for a year is not the worst thing.
Yeah, get the mental reps in at least. That's what Anthony Richardson hopefully learned from last year. This is another team that got some like defensive reinforcements from some veteran guys to help Brian Flores out, because Flores was calling anything he possibly could last year just to stay afloat.
Yeah.
And it was very creative and it was very fun, but it was still a bad defense at the end of the day because they had no one. They just didn't have enough warm bodies. And so, yeah, the Vikings will be fun to watch, and it'll be interesting. KOC, the quarterback whisperer, who got Josh Dobbs, showing up on a Saturday and playing on a Sunday to play football, and so we'll see what he can do with now the trio of Sam Darnold, McCarthy Camp, Nick Mullins, and then Brett Rippon making the roster. Chicago Bears. And talk about excitement from the quarterback position, though. The Bears are where it's at.
I'm all in on Caleb Williams, by the way.
Yes.
There's been a lot of hate, and I get it. He's kind of a hard personality, or at least was in college. He's come across very different at the NFL level, like a little bit more humbled. No, Caleb Williams is the real deal. Like, a lot of people want to hate on him because they just don't like his attitude, yada, 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 the fingernail stuff. No, man, Caleb Williams, you can hate on that all you want. Caleb Williams is the guy. The Bears have a franchise quarterback for the first time ever, ? Like, I mean, the last time they won a Super Bowl was with Jim McMahon, who is by no means a Super Bowl or a franchise quarterback, a good enough quarterback to win you the Super Bowl in the 80s. But they got a lot of Utah connections.
Not in 2024. Yeah. And so Jim McMahon, the BYU connection from our podcast circa the 1986, coming off of that Super Bowl win, McMahon was just like wrestling move bent over his back to injured at the start of the very next season against Green Bay. And then the 86 Bears defense might have been an even better version of the Bears defense than the 85 that won it. So Jim McMahon, we might have been talking about like back-to-back Super Bowl winning quarterback Jim McMahon if he wasn't just victimized by the way NFL football was played in the 1980s.
Right.
Instead, he was just kind of this one-off blip that then was basically a backup for the rest of, and he ended up being a backup for the Green Bay Packers, who injured him to kind of set his career on that trajectory. But yeah, that was the last time BYU was the kind of quarterback factory then that they kind of became now again for Jaron Hall to get this division, but then Jaron Hall was released, and so it all comes full circle. Let's talk about the Bears connections.
Yeah, Jalen Johnson got a big fat deal to stay in Chicago. Was really good for them a year ago at corner, played at Utah. Patrick Scales, their long snapper, Utah State and Weber High School, getting the shout out there. Braxton Jones, one of their backup tackles out of SUU and Murray High School, and then Noah Sewell. That Sewell name continues to show up linebacker out of Orem, got some opportunities late last year. I like this youth. I like some of the vets they also brought in, the DeAndre Swifts and the Keenan Allen, guys that have been there before, maybe aren't going to still be superstars at this point in their careers, but are going to make life a little bit easier for Caleb Williams. So I'm keeping my eye on Chicago. It's still going to be a process, but I'm keeping my eye on them.
Which is more than we could say about Chicago for so many years. Yeah. Off to the NFC South.
We got to make a division prediction, my friend.
Oh my gosh. I just assumed we kind of already did.
Well, this one's interesting because it really comes down to Detroit and Green Bay. I still got Detroit. I just think they're more established, despite what Green Bay did last year. Don't get me wrong, the Packers are going to be really good. I can see both these teams getting to 12 wins or above and making it a real fight. So, but I'm going Detroit.
Lions are my 1 seed in the NFC. This is the team I'm most comfortable with.
Same.
Now NFC South.
Yes.
Atlanta Falcons. Their offseason moves included bringing in a quarterback, Kirk Cousins. They replace the worst starting quarterback in 2023 with, just getting yourself to average can be a huge jump at that kind of position. And then Desmond Ridder ends up going to your Arizona Cardinals and then not making
now
the
he's on the
53-man
practice
roster.
Squad. Yeah.
So Kirk Cousins, huge upgrade over that. His Utah connections in him around the locker room are Tyler Algier, running back, BYU, know about him. Clark Phillips III, nickel corner out of Utah, and then Caden Ellis, second time we've seen the Ellis name show up, linebacker at Judge Memorial.
Caden Ellis was really good last year, one of the best tacklers in all of football. Clark Phillips kind of slowly got integrated in. And now that Arthur Smith is gone, how much does the love get spread out between Bijan and Tyler Algier? Two guys who still were featured a lot, obviously, because it was Arthur Smith. They ran a lot. But now how much are they used catching passes out of the backfield? How much are they used? And that is going to be, and, splitting reps is going to be real interesting because people are still very high on Algier. Despite Bijan expecting to have a massive breakout, people are still pretty high on Tyler Algier, at least from like a fantasy, to have him as kind of that last running back that takes up a roster spot for you.
The fantasy narrative is worth talking about, and we got to talk about it last year because of the Arthur Smith of it all. I think the two things going into Bijan having a huge year, I would have it at 3 things why Bijan could very well just be the fantasy 101. If you're drafting and you have the first pick, I don't think it's crazy to just take Bijan because one, he's just in his second year. Being a rookie in the NFL is very, very hard at any position. Running back, he stepped in, was very good, should have a little second year bump. 2, just the Arthur Smith factor of like everyone hated that he distributed the ball and gave it to Jonnu Smith on the goal line instead of Bijan. And I think there's a little bit of that outside pressure to make Bijan a more focal point. And then 3, the guy that brought in Zach Robinson comes from the like Rams ecosystem of things where they do just feature one back and lean heavily into him. Bijan can take that. And so I don't know, it might come at the cost of us getting to talk about Tyler Algier a lot on this podcast, but if you're a fantasy guy with drafts this weekend or early, before the season starts, take Bijan wherever you want because he could pay off.
The New Orleans Saints. Oh, they always have a ton of connections, and they do again. Yeah. Obviously, Taysom Hill, quarterback and tight end, running. You saw him at halfback and fullback during the preseason a couple times. There was talk.
I think the official position is called Kyle Juszczyk in this kind of an offense.
Is it though? Because like, I see what you're saying. Like the fullback spot is specifically called because it's no one plays fullback anymore.
Right.
I see what you're saying. I thought you were saying. I'm like, well, Kyle Juszczyk doesn't throw the football or do special
no one's
teams.
No one's Taysom Hill, but like
I see
the fact that they bring in a Shanahan kind of guy to run the new offense. New Orleans has been hanging on to this Drew Brees offense through all the coordinators, even after Sean Payton left. But now Clint Kubiak or Cliff, one of the Kubiak brothers, is the offensive coordinator here. And so this is going to be one of the few teams that does bring a fullback out there. It's only the Shanahan dudes that do that. And so Taysom Hill, who was brought out as like a tight end a little bit in the Sean Payton version of this offense, is now going to be in the backfield a little bit more as a fullback, or also, maybe taking quarterback snaps.
Yeah. Dallin Holker made the roster. Lehigh Pioneer. Played at BYU before transferring to Colorado State. He was undrafted, another undrafted rookie that got on there. Our guy Jamal's back. Jamal Williams, Nothing bad about some Jamal Williams content. Hopefully healthy this year. It's kind of the issue last year. Didn't really ever get healthy enough to do much until the last game. And Jameis Winston called an audible to hand it off to him.
He
And
got his
Arthur Smith
touchdown.
was very upset at Dennis Allen.
Oh well.
He got in. Our guy Rashid Shaheed, talk about return specialists, also was great at receiver for them last year. Really established himself as a guy, former Weber State Wildcat. And then Nephi Sewell will start on the pup as well. Played at Desert Hills at linebacker, was an Oregon linebacker as well.
Also, if you're hoping that Jamal Williams definitely gets his role, you talk about Dennis Allen being the coach here, and you're obviously not the biggest Dennis Allen fan in the world, but the offseason narrative around Dennis Allen has been him ripping into the guy that a lot of people want to see more carries, Kendre Miller, right? Because Alvin Kamara is really old. Jamal Williams didn't do much last year, but apparently Dennis Allen just hates Kendre Miller's guts. And so Jamal Williams is still probably going to go in here as the number 2 back.
Kendre Miller, they spent a good draft pick on him too. What, third round pick last year, 4th round pick maybe. So,
yeah. Tampa Bay Buccaneers won this division last year, by the way. No Utah connections.
Yeah,
and not a lot of real good vibe energy coming into this season either. Honestly,
right. This division's fascinating for the wrong reasons. Carolina, I think they're going to be a little bit better. They're still going to.
So they bring in the offensive coordinator from Tampa Bay last year, right? Dave Canales is their new head coach. So if the guy can save Geno and Baker's career, maybe.
I think there's still some hope for Bryce Young. Yeah, and I was really bummed that Frank Reich didn't work out there because I loved him in Indy. I thought he didn't get a fair shake, and then maybe it showed why he didn't get a fair shake in Indy because that was just a mess from the get-go. It was kind of the Monty Williams of the Pistons in basketball.
Oof.
Kind of wondered why he got fired, and then he went to another place, and it was almost like, oh, both this is why, and oh, he just did this for a paycheck. Like he doesn't really want to be here.
Yeah.
And then they fire him. But they still have Brady Christensen, who they spent a third round pick on. If this is his 4th season now. So really interested to see if he really starts to establish himself. He's been a rotational starter, part of it because of injuries to him, injuries to some other people as well over the years there in Carolina. Cole, this division has driven me nuts on who to pick. I don't believe in the Falcons yet because I still think management is bad. I love Raheem Morris and the energy he brings and that he finally gets a shot at being a head coach. I don't like the Saints because I don't like Dennis Allen and I don't trust Dennis Allen. But then also, I don't know that Tampa Bay does it back-to-back years like this. There's just...
And Carolina's not ready.
And
right?
Carolina
can write them off immediately.
Yes. So this is the one division I'm like, what are we doing here? So I'm going to go with Tampa Bay.
Okay.
I'm going with Tampa Bay because I like Baker Mayfield. And I like that he kind of restored his name and got paid somewhat. And I believe in Baker. I don't know that I believe in much else going on in Tampa Bay right now, but I kind of believe in Baker. And so I'm going to go with the Buccaneers.
See, Geno took a little step down after Canales left. I expect Baker to take an even more step down because I don't think he was physically the guy that Geno was in the first place. And so whatever the Canales bump is. Anyway, I'm taking the Falcons just because, I mean, they make the move. They go and bring in the Patriots edge defender this past week. Like they're making all those correct all-in moves, like drafting a 27-year-old quarterback, whatever, in the first round.
After signing a 40-year-old quarterback to an insane amount of money.
So, the logical all-in kind of things. Penix aside, everything else about the Falcons screams that they're ready right now. And so I will just trust them. And if they don't do it, I will just be another voice in the choir of like, you put everything into this year in the first place. And so if it doesn't work, the expectations are high enough that things have to, there has to be some kind of recourse if it doesn't happen. The NFC West. Tanner, your division now.
Yeah.
And we'll start with your least favorite team. It is the San Francisco 49ers with our favorite player in all of the National Football League, Fred Warner, best linebacker in the league, out of BYU.
So it makes it hard for me.
He is the off-ball linebacker prototype that you want. If playing Mike, it's not the old school Brian Urlacher style in the Tampa 2. It's whatever the heck Fred Warner's doing in San Francisco. This is the model right now for, honestly, this decade in the NFL. People will look back and say, that's what the position was doing, and it's Fred Warner. And then we also have a punter out of Utah, Mitch Wishnowsky, to talk about Utah connections for the 49ers.
Yeah, a lot of drama with the Niners between Brandon Ayuk, and the Trent Williams situation is somehow worse. Like,
yeah,
you think the Brandon Ayuk drama is bad? Trent Williams is like, I'm not showing up unless you make me worth it. And I don't just think I'm worth it. I think I'm really worth it. And to be fair, that's part of how this Niner roster's been constructed, by guys who are worth it. That's why they've been so stinking good. And that's where the conundrum comes in a salary cap situation. You can't pay everyone.
Paying Purdy 2 peanuts, but it's not going to be that way forever.
No.
And so they can't keep extending out because they have in their mind like the 5 years after Purdy, right? He was 7th round pick in 2022. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is his 5th year option. You almost can't write any contracts into stone in 2027 because you're going to be setting the market then.
Oh boy. Look, they're still very good. They still have Shanahan. Even without those two guys as valuable, I think Williams is more valuable than Brandon Ayuk because you still have Deebo Samuel. You drafted Ricky Pearsall with a first-round pick at receiver. You could afford to move on from an Ayuk. And if that's me, that's what I do. Move on from Ayuk, get some good value back, some good draft capital back, pay Trent Williams while you've got him. That's my 2 cents on the situation.
But you have yet another Super Bowl collapse for Shanahan. You have possible CMC offseason injuries-ish, and just a Madden cover curse looming over things. And also, just the idea that running backs can't do it forever. If the 49ers are ever going to fall off, if the collapse was ever imminent, we are looking at it right now.
Yeah, it's going to happen at some point. This isn't the San Antonio Spurs of the 2000s. The NFL doesn't work like that. So the Rams, who were a little darling last year because Puka Nacua was our MVP for the whole season, set rookie records for receiving yards in a season and in a playoff game, and just didn't stop. It was all Puka all the time last year on the show, and for good reason. Did you read the article about him training with Cooper Kupp this offseason? Throwing up on his front lawn, bringing his brothers in to do some of the same things. Puka's not slowing down. He might not put up the same exact numbers that he did a year ago, but he's established himself enough that he's a top-tier wide receiver in the National Football League and is going to have a long career should he stay healthy.
And all that publicity that he bought last year got Samson a spot on probably on a practice squad, and got that kick return that came just like a couple yards short of getting into the end zone, which was the highlights of the preseason for the Saints.
Samson Antetokounmpo.
Thanasis Nuka.
One of the
Nacua.
Thanasis Nacua. One of the best memes I've seen all summer. As much as I love the Nacua brothers and the energy they brought to BYU when they were there. Now with a younger brother that made the depth chart, made the 3 deep at BYU, or I guess it's technically the 2 deep because there's an or next to his name. So
that's how BYU runs.
It is, yeah. Tay Nacua. So there you go. Rams should be interesting though. Should be interesting. Older Matthew Stafford, but a lot of other good young guys that they retooled with, and it's Sean McVay. Even though Aaron Donald's gone, it's still Sean McVay. So
Seahawks are next. They have one Utah connection. It is Satoa Lumia, an offensive guard from the University of Utah. It's going to be how this defense responds and is, changes to the Mike McDonald system. And then can Geno get elevated up, and is Ryan Grubb a different enough offensive coordinator to bring some of that college stuff to their 3 wide with DK and Tyler Lockett and JSN, Jackson, who just wasn't used optimally last year, I would guess.
That's what I would say too.
You and I both picked, I think one of us might have picked the Seahawks to win this division over the 49ers last year. These were like the 2 teams.
Yeah.
And then the Seahawks still weren't bad. They didn't bottom out or anything. And now hopefully they can turn it around. I'm a little higher on the Seahawks this year.
And I'm not. I think we know who Geno is at this point. So that'll be interesting. My Arizona Cardinals. who I thought had
the best for last.
Had a wonderful offseason. And I genuinely mean that. Because you drafted Marvin Harrison Jr., the best wide receiver prospect since Calvin Johnson, / Jamar Chase. Maybe you could make if Jamar Chase plays another year at LSU, I think that goes in there.
He took that season off, and we didn't know if he could catch balls with a stripe on him or whatever the narrative was around Jamar Chase.
Right.
That's fair.
Very excited about this Cardinal team. Not because I think they're going to be good, but I think because there's finally some hope. And hope is a very dangerous thing for a guy like me. However, they're heading the right direction. I didn't love the Jonathan Gannon hire because it was I guess he's the one guy that's left, so we might as well hire him kind of attitude. But I liked Gannon a year ago. They won some games they shouldn't have, which made me nervous about getting Marvin. They got Marvin anyway. They established some good culture. This is the year for Kyler Murray. This is make or break. Are you going to be a franchise quarterback or are you not? Now's the time to decide that for Kyler Murray. And either way, the Cardinals have done a nice job drafting in the 2 years that Monty McNair's been our guy as the lead GM, the lead front office guy. Much better drafting than Keim ever did in his time in Arizona. So there's some optimism. Kyrus Tonga was signed. He'll be in that defensive line rotation at defensive tackle. He's been with the Vikings the last few years out of BYU, and then Granger High School was mission companions with my cousin. So kind of fun now. He's on my team, which is exciting.
Tanner, are you going to say who's your winner from the NFC West?
It's going to be the Niners.
All right.
I feel like the division's slightly down. So I think it's still going to be the Niners.
I also still have the Niners. And so you had Cowboys, Lions, Buccaneers, and 49ers. Who are your wild cards?
The Green Bay Packers are easily that number 5 team, I think, without any sort of questions at all. I'm going to go Philadelphia at number 6, and I'm taking the Rams at number 7. Just out of I don't think the NFC is not deep. I think you've got a couple top-tier teams and then a bunch of average teams that could be fighting for these last few wild card spots or even division spots, given how some of these divisions might be looking. So,
and that's going to be evidenced in the fact that we have different teams here, because I think the Rams are a little too fragile. I think as Stafford gets older and older and older, he had injuries 2 years ago, and then last year was back and still looked good, but then, I'm not sure if he can carry it forward. So I do not have the Rams. I have the Seahawks as my number 5. And then Cowboys, because I had the Eagles as the division winner. Tanner, I got the Bears.
I like it. Ooh, I like it a lot.
Which
I didn't have the guts to do it.
It kicks the Packers out. I don't like the Jordan Love of it. I don't like. I think that LaFleur can do all those things, and that was the conversation that we had. But when I was making the picks, I got the Bears in because I think Caleb Williams is about to be the truth. And then Eberflus proved why they didn't just immediate, you have Caleb Williams coming in. The gut reaction from all of NFL Twitter was bring in the hottest offensive coordinator, match with him, whatever it is. They kept Eberflus. They want to keep the trajectory of this defense going. Jalen Johnson is one of the highest paid DBs in the world, and I think for good reason. And they have young guys, Tyreek Stevenson and everything else. So give me some Bears in the playoffs. First year Caleb Williams.
I like it. Well, my friend, we're 2 episodes in. It's been a pleasure. We'll be talking on Thursday about the games. We'll make our picks
of the season.
First picks, first guest. It'll all be coming up Thursday. This has been Wilk and Wiss, your bi-weekly opportunity to hear about Utah athletes and their connections in the National Football League. For Cole Wissinger, I'm Tanner Wilkinson. Adios, my friend.